There is a $1 paste you can mix in a coffee cup right now that kills every wood-boring beetle larva living inside your furniture, your floor joists, and your cabin logs. It does not require tenting your house. It does not require evacuating your family. It does not require a single drop of toxic fumigant gas. It kills on contact, and when it dries, it crystallizes inside the wood grain and prevents any beetle from ever laying eggs there again, permanently. We did not lose this solution because it stopped working. We lost it because a $1 fix that never needs reapplying destroys a pest control industry that bills you $1,000 per visit and needs you to call back every single year. This is the story of the pioneer paste that protected American log cabins for 2 centuries. The simple mineral that acts as a fatal poison to every wood-eating insect on Earth, and the exposed trillion-dollar extermination machine that buried it to keep you dependent. In the heart of the Appalachian Mountains, the war against wood-boring insects was fought in silence. Settlers built cabins from hand-hewn logs, only to find them riddled with pin-sized holes and packed with powdery dust, evidence of an enemy that worked unseen. The threat was not just cosmetic. Inside those logs, powderpost beetle larvae could tunnel for years, unseen and unstoppable, until entire beams crumbled under their own weight. Families would sweep up flour-fine frass from the floor, uncertain whether the structure above their heads would hold through the next winter. A diary entry from 1793, written in spidery ink and tucked away in a regional archive, tells of a family waking to find their cabin floor sagging, the boards soft as sponge. The entry describes a substance white as snow in a cup beside the coffee, mixed with water and brushed onto the logs in hope of saving the home. The recipe was simple. The cost, barely $1 in today's money. The result, according to the writer, was a halt to the sifting dust and a cabin that stood for generations. The name of the powder was not recorded, but the process, mixing a mineral in a coffee cup and applying it to raw wood, became a whispered remedy passed between neighbors, far from the reach of any merchant or traveling tinker. The pressure from wood-boring beetles was relentless. Lictid larvae, the true powderpost beetles, could live inside hardwood for up to 5 years, digesting the very beams that held up the roof. Their presence revealed only by the talc-like frass that sifted from pinholes, softer and finer than any termite dust. In the humid Appalachian valleys, where oak and ash were plentiful, every cabin risked collapse if the infestation went unchecked. Without a solution, settlers faced the prospect of tearing down and rebuilding from scratch, a cost few could bear in money or time. Yet, stories persisted of cabins that stood untouched by worms, even as neighbors watched their own beams hollow out. The difference, according to local lore, was a secret paste, cheap, colorless, and permanent. It was not sold in general stores. It was not advertised in almanacs. But it was passed down in family notebooks and whispered at barn raisings, a way to make wood immune to the worms forever, using nothing more than a mineral found in the laundry bin. For those who knew, the solution was not just affordable. It was a lifeline, quietly defying the cycle of infestation and repair that enriched others. The evidence of its power would soon be found, not in legend, but in the preserved artifacts that survived when all others had failed. Inside the Appalachian Heritage Museum, a hand-labeled tag dangles from the corner of a poplar cabinet. The accession note dates it to 1804, yet the wood, is flawless. No pinholes, no powdery residue, no trace of the slow destruction that claimed so many of its contemporaries. The conservator, white gloves dusted with age, flips through paperwork that lists the cabinet's journey, from a family homestead through 3 generations to this climate-controlled room. The record offers only a cryptic remark: treated for worms, no further damage since arrival. No mention of creosote or heavy metals, no chemical scent lingering in the grain. Just a whisper of something simple, something that cost less than a loaf of bread. This artifact stands as physical proof that some wood, against all odds, survived the silent siege of beetles. The conservator points to others: shaker benches, tool handles, barn planks, remarkably intact, while neighboring pieces sit riddled with holes. In each case, the paperwork hints at a mineral wash, a household powder, or a recipe handed down but rarely written out. The evidence is scattered but persistent. These objects defy the timeline of decay, raising questions that echo far beyond the museum walls. The search for answers stretches across continents. In the museum research files, a faded letter describes a shipment of tincal arriving by wagon from a Philadelphia importer in 1882, intended for a furniture maker battling powderpost worm. Tincal, crude borax, was already known in Asia as a trade good carried along the Silk Road, prized for glassmaking and medicine. Rumors swirl in conservation circles about ancient Chinese lacquerers and Tibetan carpenters using borates to keep insects at bay, though no Silk Road manifest or Tang Dynasty manual spells out the method. What survives are fragments: a merchant's invoice, a conservator's field note, a logbook from a British India trading post listing borax among the goods for wood protection. Every scrap of evidence points to a mineral that moved quietly through global trade, valued not for its rarity, but for its power to halt destruction where nothing else could. Yet the paper trail ends before the science begins. The next step demands proof, not just in stories or museum tags, but in laboratory tests that can confirm what these artifacts suggest. Only then can the claims of permanent $1 protection stand against the billion-dollar machinery of modern pest control. Inside every timber marked by powderpost beetles, a hidden siege unfolds. The culprit is almost invisible: a larva, pale and crescent-shaped, smaller than a grain of rice, hatched deep inside the pores of oak or ash. For as long as 5 years, these larvae tunnel in silence, feeding on the fibers that give wood its strength. Their jaws grind away at the heartwood, turning beams into powder so fine it slips through floorboards unnoticed. By the time the first pinholes show, the damage is already done. Whole sections reduced to hollow shells, the core eaten away from within. The beetle's persistence comes down to biology. Females lay eggs in unfinished wood, often in pores too small to see. The larvae hatch, burrow inward, and follow the scent of starch and cellulose. They feed slowly, carving a maze of tunnels and leaving behind frass, fine, talc-like dust. No chemical warning, no visible sign, just the gradual loss of strength until a floor sags or a beam fails. Traditional extermination relies on force, tenting a house and flooding it with sulfuryl fluoride gas. The gas kills what it reaches, but leaves no residue, no barrier, no lasting protection. Once it dissipates, the wood is as vulnerable as before. One surviving female, one patch of untreated wood, and the cycle restarts. Repeat treatments and callbacks are common, feeding an industry built on temporary solutions. Borax, sodium borate, works differently. When mixed with water and brushed onto bare wood, it soaks deep into the grain. As it dries, borate crystals form inside every tunnel and cell wall. These crystals are invisible and permanent in dry indoor wood. When a larva chews into treated timber, it ingests borate along with the starch. Inside the gut, boron atoms disrupt the enzymes needed to digest cellulose, shutting down metabolism. The larva starves, unable to process its only food. There is no adaptation, no resistance, just a dead end sealed by a mineral that costs less than $1 per batch. Laboratory tests show that a 2 to 5% borax paste wipes out entire infestations. No emergence holes, no frass, no callbacks. The borate stays locked in the wood, harmless to people and pets, but deadly to any insect that feeds. Unlike fumigants, borax creates a barrier that lasts for decades. The science is clear, the mechanism proven, a simple mineral outperforming the most expensive treatments. Lab results alone rarely settle the question of what endures. It is the field evidence, wood that survives decades of rain, heat, and insect pressure, that draws the line between theory and reality. In 1986, the USDA Forest Products Laboratory placed borate-treated pine panels in the subtropical climate of Hilo, Hawaii, a region infamous for termites and wood-boring beetles. After 25 years in constant exposure, the treated boards showed no visible damage. Untreated controls set out alongside them were destroyed within 3 years. Technicians documented the results. Zero mass loss, no emergence holes, no powdery frass, while the controls had collapsed into brittle husks. The only variable was the mineral solution brushed onto the wood before installation. Similar field trials in Mississippi and Florida echoed these results. Borate-treated southern pine resisted both termites and beetle larvae for more than a decade, while untreated timber failed in a single season. Reports from the USDA Southern Research Station described how boron, once inside the wood, crystallized and remained lethal to insects for the life of the timber. Unlike surface pesticides or fumigants, borate did not evaporate, degrade, or wash away under normal indoor conditions. It formed an invisible barrier, permanent as long as the wood stayed dry. European conservators encountered the same phenomenon in centuries-old buildings. In Umbria, restoration teams analyzing Renaissance timber frames found boron residues deep within the heartwood, sometimes 5 centimeters from the surface. Spectrometry revealed that the mineral had migrated inward over centuries, creating a lethal zone that powderpost beetle larvae could not cross. In structures where borate had been applied, beams remained solid, while untreated neighbors were riddled with tunnels. One Italian conservator, holding a core sample from a 15th century oak beam, remarked, "The boron is still here, long after the builders and the beetles are gone." The contrast with modern fumigation is stark. Sulfuryl fluoride, the industry's go-to gas, kills insects present at the time of treatment, but leaves no residue. Once the tent comes down and the gas dissipates, the wood is as vulnerable as ever. Reinfestation is common, and callbacks are built into the business model. In the words of a USDA entomologist, fumigation is a reset, not a solution. Borate's record stands on both continents, $1 worth of mineral, applied once, offering protection measured in decades. No callbacks, no toxic gases, no need for evacuation. Just a silent defense locked inside the wood, defying the cycle of destruction and repair. The data is clear, the implications unavoidable. If such a simple treatment truly works, then the question is not about efficacy. It is about why this knowledge faded from common use. In the years between the wars, a quiet revolution unfolded in American workshops and rural communities. Shaker joiners in Massachusetts, Amish barn builders in Ohio, and even National Park Service crews in the West all shared a common code: protect the wood or lose it. Manuals from the 1920s and the 1930s, faded at the edges and smudged by calloused hands, list borax right alongside linseed oil and turpentine. The instructions are plain: mix the powder with hot water and brush it deep into every joint, every beam, every plank that might one day shelter a worm. The cost, less than $1 for a bucket, made it a staple in farmsteads and furniture shops from Pennsylvania to Oregon. During the Great Depression, civilian Conservation Corps crews logged the forests of the Smoky Mountains and Yellowstone, building lodges and ranger cabins with timber that would stand for generations. Their field notes, preserved in yellowing government files, mention mineral wash as routine, a step as essential as sharpening a saw. In the Midwest, Shaker communities passed down their own variations, using borax for everything from benches to tool handles. The logic was simple: a cheap, colorless mineral could stop the slow rot of powderpost beetles, saving wood and labor for decades. By the 1940s, even trade catalogs for hardware stores and chemical suppliers advertised borax as the answer to woodworm, a permanent fix, not a patch. But as the post-war boom gathered speed, the story began to change. Ads for new chemical treatments crowded out the old recipes. Glossy brochures from pest control companies promised instant results, touting proprietary formulas and professional-only application. The language shifted from prevention to service, annual contracts, scheduled callbacks, and a growing list of chemicals that cost 10, 20, 100 times more than a box of borax. Manuals that once listed borax as a household staple began to disappear from shelves. By the late 1950s, the same companies that once sold borax as a cure quietly pivoted to selling synthetic fumigants and surface sprays. What had been public knowledge, shared in almanacs, passed down at barn raisings, printed on the back of a laundry box, became a footnote, overshadowed by the promise of fast, professional results. In the archives of trade journals and 1950s chemical ads, the pivot is unmistakable. Where borax once stood as a symbol of thrift and permanence, new slogans urged customers to trust the experts, to leave the problem to those with access to modern science. The shift was subtle but total. The cheapest, most enduring solution faded from memory, replaced by a business model built on recurring treatments and dependence. The mineral that once protected cabins and churches now sat on the back shelf, its power hidden in plain sight, as the industry moved to keep the cycle of infestation and profit alive. The numbers behind modern pest control reveal a system built on endless return visits. The global market for structural pest management now stands at $26 billion, with a significant share flowing into repeat fumigation and annual contracts. A single treatment for powderpost beetles or termites can cost a homeowner thousands, yet the promise is never for permanence, only for a reset. The cycle is lucrative: callbacks, yearly inspections, and proprietary chemicals that must be reapplied. Each invoice feeding a business model designed for recurrence, not resolution. A retired technician, hands still stained from years of crawling under houses, remembers the shift. We used to treat wood once and walk away, but after the new chemicals came in, we were told to sell service plans. The old mineral stuff, it was cheap and it worked, but there was no money in a fix that lasted. Worked. For decades, The story of borax, a mineral that costs less than $1 per batch, was quietly erased from the script. Trade journals stopped mentioning it. Hardware stores pushed branded sprays and gels. Pest control franchises rewrote their training manuals, focusing on products that required licensed application and frequent renewal. The result was a kind of amnesia, enforced not by regulation, but by the slow, deliberate withdrawal of public knowledge. The method that once protected barns and benches for generations became a rumor, a ghost in the margins of old manuals and almanacs. Yet the recipe never truly vanished. In the back pages of a farmer's almanac from the 1950s, wedged between ads for liniment and seed corn, the formula appears in plain language. 1 part borax, dissolved in 3 parts hot water, with a spoonful of sugar to help the minerals soak into the wood. Brush it on bare timber, no tenting, no evacuation, no toxic fumes. The borate crystals lock inside, forming an invisible barrier that outlasts any gas or spray. The cost, under $1 for enough paste to treat a porch or a set of floor joists. This is the knowledge that never made it into glossy brochures or trade show booths. It is the reason one batch of paste could threaten a recurring revenue stream worth $26 billion. The industry's silence was not accidental. It was profitable. If you're finding this story for the first time, now is the moment to subscribe. The next chapter exposes how the formula was buried, and for those ready to reclaim it, how the original recipe can be mixed and applied with nothing more than a box of borax and a coffee mug. Today, the same boron mineral that sells for $1 in any grocery aisle still outperforms toxic gas that costs thousands, leaving behind a shield, not just a one-time fix. As the pest control industry grows into a giant worth $12 billion, forgotten solutions become threats, not tools. Sometimes what is lost is not just a recipe. It is the right to defend your own home. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.